Hi everybody. Hi mom.
Hi, Neil.
Everybody say hi to my mom.
Hi, everybody.
So this is a very special video, right, for us.
It is.
We want to talk about your and your family's experience during the Second World War. So it's
In other words, the Holocaust.
Holocaust. So it's not a very light subject, but the stories, some of them are uplifting and spectacular. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
It's depending. It depends how you look at it. But anyway.
So we've heard these stories about your family. It was just never connected, just like this story, that story. My mom, my grandmother, this uncle, and we never really. And every time we talked about it, like there was some new information for us. Also, my sister is here behind the camera. Hi, sister.
Hi,
you want to come over and say hello? This is like a family thing now, right? So recently we said that we should record all your memories and all the stories for posterity. So then I thought maybe make a video about it. We'll all have copies of this for children and
for the generations to come.
Yes, and also for you people, for you guys. Hope you find it educating and interesting and stuff.
Okay.
So, Mom.
Yes, dear.
How are you?
I'm fine.
We're nervous a little bit.
A little bit, yes.
Right.
I'm not used to talking on camera.
And also because the subject matter.
And the subject matter,
personal.
and it's very personal, right. But
Okay.
this is something, as I said,
Mhm.
something you've wanted us to do for a long time, and you had to talk me into it. And
Was I? Did I?
Yeah.
Have you to talk into?
No, I mean, I wasn't sure that I was ready, but I am.
Okay.
And I understand the importance,
Right.
seeing that I have not only children, but grandchildren.
Mhm.
And
How many grandchildren do you have?
3, girl and 2 boys.
My
And
daughter and
your daughter
my
and-
brother's 2 sons.
Yes, and Ariel, Shachar, and Neta, if you're talking about them already. And it'll be a good thing for them to know that there is a family history.
Right. And it's interesting also,
And it is
regardless.
interesting, yeah.
Okay. So let's start with the beginning. It's kind of a good way to start.
Usually,
right?
yes, it's a good
Not
way.
always. Sometimes you can start at the end.
And
But let's start at the beginning.
middle, yeah, okay.
So you were born.
If I may, first of all.
You were born. You were born, or
Yes,
weren't
I'm
you born?
definitely born.
So you were born during the Holocaust, during the Second World War. But until recently,
Until a few years ago, I didn't consider myself a first generation survivor, but the second.
right,
My parents were the survivors,
Right.
and I was the second
right, and
generation.
I consider myself a third generation.
And then one day you sort of have a epiphany, and you said, "Mom, you're actually a survivor yourself. You were born during the war, and you survived it. And not only you thought so, apparently the authorities thought so
Which authorities?
in Israel and in Germany.
Okay.
And since then, I've been receiving monthly
Whatever.
compensation.
Allowance, compensation?
Wait, since when?
Since 2 or 3 years ago. I applied. I was supposed to apply to write down everything that went on during and where I was born and what happened, and and sort of an allowance, or I don't know what it's actually called.
So what? So
And it was kind of a sort of overwhelming
Right.
for me to consider myself
Right.
a survivor.
were you ambivalent towards it?
Yes, I didn't want to think myself as such.
Why?
But
Why?
because it's sort of a stigma, I don't know.
For you, not
As a victim. And
Maybe back then it was more.
and it was. I had.
And you grew up all this time not considering yourself something, and now I'm something
Hey.
totally else. That also I'm a
And-
Holocaust survivor. Boom.
Yeah, and I
something.
already have this stamp on my forehead, and I'm now part of a community, of a group of people who are much older, who really went
Experienced
through
worse stuff.
10 million times
Right.
worse.
Nobody, like you don't have a number of.
Nor my parents.
Nor my parents.
Since
Nor your
they,
parents.
never
Yeah,
were
never
never
caught.
never captured and transported to a concentration camp, which is of course like the ultimate.
Yeah, fortunately.
But they experienced quite
Hardships. Of course.
and
And you experienced as a
fear
baby.
and fear and dread and I assume that I too must have,
Of course, because you're human.
as I was born in August 1944, which is about 10 months before the end of the war.
August 1944. Where were you born? In which country?
I was born in Czechoslovakia, which is Central Europe.
So-
Now it
So
is.
today I told my friend, she asked me where was she born. I said Hungary. I thought you were born in
so
Hungary.
no, you were wrong.
Did you know that you were born in
Yes, she
Czechoslovakia?
speaks Hungarian because that was the language that they spoke there.
One of the languages,
Yeah.
because the Czechoslovakia, which is now Slovakia and the Czech Republic.
Of course.
So I was born, according to today's borders, in Slovakia.
Where
Today's Slovakia,
which
in
village
in
or
a town called Levoča.
Levoča.
And this is where my parents went for my birth, to
Okay.
have me.
So you were in hiding. You were born
I
in
was
hiding.
born in hiding, yes.
During the war. So your
In
parents, they
hi-
weren't in any concentration camp.
Never.
They were
went.
hiding and running.
They were always hiding. They always found people, good people, to whom they paid for that,
Okay.
because it was anyway a great risk on their part and for those who gave them
Who hid-
shelter.
Yeah.
So it was a risk nevertheless, but they did it.
Okay. So you were born.
I was born.
Not specifically the place you were born. You were born in a hospital. We'll talk
I
about
wa-
that in a second.
okay.
But the house you were raised until you were 10 months old, or even after the war a little bit. You stayed there in a house.
No, I
No?
wasn't all the time in my parents' care. We'll get to it maybe
Okay.
later.
Okay. But the guy that hid you. Tell us a little bit about that guy.
I don't know who the guy hid me.
No, your parents.
I know of at least two. So as you said, I was born unexpectedly, you would say, in a hospital. In a hospital bed.
In Nazi-controlled Slovakia.
Yes. And my mother, she was a medical student. She couldn't finish her studies because she was expelled from university because of numerus clausus. Students which belong to a certain ethnic group or minority are excluded from studies because of a decree, a political decree, which says that they are no longer entitled to continue their studies.
That was in 38 or 39?
39.
Because
or
the,
40 maybe, I'm not sure.
because the Nazis, they went into Slovakia in
No,
38.
and Slovakia was already under occupation. As you remember, in 38, Czechoslovakia was already under under occupation.
Right.
Of
The Nazis.
Nazi German occupation. So she was expelled from school, but she knew people apparently, the doctors, so they enabled her to give birth in a hospital.
Even though they knew she was Jewish.
Oh, this is the interesting thing which my mother told me several times, that the people, the doctors, the nurses, knew that she was Jewish, but they haven't shared that information among themselves.
Each of them knew individually?
Individually.
Sure. Let's not talk
And
about
they
it.
kept it to themselves and never talked about it. Not only that, but they allowed my father to stay in hospital, in hiding,
In the hospital.
in the same room, I think maybe in the bathroom or in a closet. And they even left for him part of some food so that he could survive. This is the story I was told, that he was there in hiding, out of sight.
This is horrible.
This is an amazing story. To think that those people really made it possible.
Right. They took a risk.
A great risk. So I don't know what exactly happened later and what ensued, but they went to stay in some place, I don't know where. But one of the stories which my mother told me several times, that she had to find milk for me because she wasn't breastfeeding, obviously because of
Yeah.
Jewish man.
Yeah.
As you can imagine. And she would go out at night to fetch milk, dressed as a peasant woman with a kerchief on her hair, tied underneath a chin, dressed as in a coat, boots, and a pitcher for the milk,
Cow's milk.
cow's milk. And she'd go out, and she said that more than one occasion, she was met by German soldiers with hound dogs this high who would sniff around her. And since she didn't look Jewish,
Okay.
she could pass as a Slovak peasant woman. So they didn't bother her. So this is one of the courageous acts of motherhood that I carry with me for all these. I've been carrying around for these years. I was also told that once in one of the places we were hiding, on one occasion, there was a knock on the door.
Where were your parents staying at the time of your
I
birth?
have no idea.
You have no idea where they
No.
were staying.
After my birth, I don't know.
But before your birth, you know?
No. I don't know where they were staying. Never told me. So I don't have
Why?
the entire story.
Why didn't they tell you?
Everything was told in anecdotes, experiences, moments, special experiences that remained with them. It was never told in a continuous as a story from beginning to end.
Right, like sit down, I want to tell you the story.
No,
It wasn't
never.
this way.
We're sitting around the Shabbat table, and my father would say something, tell me a story, remember something all of a sudden. This is how, and I wasn't asking.
Yeah, I guess you knew maybe not to ask.
I don't know.
Subconsciously.
Today maybe I would have.
Of course.
And
This is a well-known phenomenon that Holocaust survivors did not share their stories with their children, but rather with their grandchildren. They felt more comfortable. So then the second generation, of course, you're a first generation, but they found out through their own children that the grandpa or grandma told me this and that. So this is.
But my
natural.
father was more talkative than most people who went through the Holocaust.
Right.
He did share
Okay, so
some of the stories.
Okay, so if we don't know exactly when and what happened, do you know approximately during that time, a little bit before, a little bit after your birth, where they were staying?
I know before my mother was married. I mean, they met in another city, town, by the name of Prešov, and which is where my mother and her parents and her brothers lived.
Okay.
And this is where my father met her, and
how did they meet? You don't know?
No, I don't exactly know. I think through friends or family. My father had ties, you would say, with local Hungarian police.
But this was in Slovakia.
Slovakia was changed hands. She was sometimes is part of Hungary.
So your dad was born what year?
He was born in 1907.
So he was during the First World War, and your mom?
She was born in 1915.
During the war?
Yeah.
Okay.
During the First World War.
Did your father tell you any experiences about the First World War?
No, never. But my mother told me that her father was absent almost 2 years during the war. He was in the First World. He took part in fighting, but I don't know.
For the Austro-Hungarian Empire?
Yeah, as part of the Austro-Hungarian.
Okay, so in that time, what is now Slovakia was then Hungary?
It
must have been.
Must have been. And
so he had ties with authorities?
Not with authorities, with people.
Right.
Policemen, simple policemen, or
Right.
even maybe higher, because on one very dramatic occasion, he knew in advance that on a certain date, on that date, all the young women, unmarried women, would be
rounded
up in what is called an aktia, which is on a certain date, only that group of people is rounded up in a certain place in a town center, square, and
shipped
and transported to this concentration camp. So everybody, he alerted everyone he knew, including, of course, my mother and her friends. And and my mother and several of her friends, girlfriends, female friends, were hiding at her parents' house in the attic.
Okay.
Okay? And
they weren't looking for her parents because they were looking for
so my
unmarried
grandmother could walk around freely. And in fact, they came in.
Into the house.
They knocked on the door.
The Gestapo.
Or
SS or whatever.
Whatever. And they walked in. And my grandmother, let them in. Apparently, the door of the attic was in the line of sight of the people coming in. So in order for them, she told them, so she wanted them not to look up. So she said, take care, bend your head a bit because you might get hit by the door or whatever.
So they had their head down.
They looked down and they never saw that sort of what could be construed as an opening or a door of the attic.
Think how many people weren't so lucky.
There were at least 15 women up there.
Really?
Yeah. And the sad part is that after they left and everything sort of seemed calm, a few of them came down and went home to look to
some of them weren't so lucky.
Some of the girls were worried about the parents. They went home. And that was and later they learned, my mother learned that they were all captured and taken and never came back actually.
How many of them?
About 4 or 5 of them.
Okay. So this was before your parents married, but he alerted her. So he saved all these women.
Yeah.
And the guys that tipped him off, they saved all these people.
Exactly. Another very dramatic anecdote is when my father was apparently just walking down the street. And
in Levocha?
In Prešov.
In Prešov.
And they were rounding up men. Young men.
In the street?
In the street because apparently there weren't enough for the transport. So they were taking people at random, whoever they came across.
Okay.
And there he was standing in line with the others, not knowing exactly what was happening, but he was there. And it so happens that a policeman, an Hungarian Slovak, who knew him, an acquaintance, saw him. He, of course, knew immediately what was going on, and he said, so in order to
alert him.
Yeah, but without letting the others know that there is something that he was trying to save him, he pretended to scream at him and yell at him. And he called him by his name and he said, what do you mean? Schweig. What do you think? Coming like this, no suitcase, nothing, just like that? What do you mean? Go home and get your things together.
Like we rated him to make it credible.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is how he was just in a fluke. He happened to come by.
The person that knew him.
Yeah. This is a very. This is something which I also saw in Polanski's movie, The Pianist. There's something similar when he encounters somebody whom, when he was standing there, there's a friend of his, the policeman, also told him, what are you doing here? So he sort of snuck out of the line. I assume that, I remember that because it sort of struck a chord in me, and I said, this is something like similar to what happened to my father, who was just in the nick of time, was saved by someone who just happened to be there and who knew.
Want to drink some water?
Yeah, maybe I should.
Okay, so both these incidents, you think before they were married?
Another incident, so this I'm not very sure when, but these are also very unimaginable incidents. That when my parents were staying at the house of 2 unmarried women, very pious women, religious women. Catholic,
Jewish? Catholic.
no Catholic. My father paid them. But they had a great respect for him because he was religious.
Your father?
He was religious. So they sort of thought that he was a good person and they wanted to help him. On one of the occasions when, again, the Gestapo paid a visit, they were at home, both my mother and father. So that must have been
Very scary.
no, maybe after
Oh.
I was already born, but I'm not sure.
But you weren't there.
I don't know where I was, if I was there or not.
This is incredible that you don't know where you were.
No, it's amazing, but I don't. But what is more important is that my father had
Okay, spirit, whatever.
this incredible
Yeah, spur of the moment thing.
spur of the moment thinking. He went into the tub and threw all the
dirty
wash, all the dirty clothes on himself into the tub. But his hat was hanging by the door.
Mm.
So this is interesting because when they came in, apparently there was not supposed to be a man in the house. But they never asked, what is that hat doing on hanging there when there is no man in a house of two Spencers, two sisters? And they never checked the bathtub.
And your mom?
And my mom, she was sitting in another. She was sitting at the time in another room, and she said to
On the
herself,
couch.
Armchair.
"Armchair."
Okay.
She sat in an arm. She was sitting in an armchair, and the way she was telling it, and she said to herself, "So what am I going to do? There is nowhere to hide here."
And I don't want them to come in and see me.
Exactly. I just sit here like an idiot. So she did what maybe a 5-year-old would do. She went behind the armchair and crouched behind the chair. Ducked. That's it.
And they came in, didn't see you.
So they came in. They never turned the light on. They just went through that room into the other side of the house.
I'm guessing those two women must have put up quite an act for the Gestapo / SS not to feel that there's something wrong, that they need to be vigilant.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They probably go, oh, okay, come in. I don't know what they were thinking.
I don't know. But my mother said that the fact that my father was religious was a plus, and that's why they were so inclined to help them.
Also, from what I've been reading, there was a larger percentage of Catholics who were opposed to the Nazi regime because of their anti-Christian policy.
I'm sure that they weren't active in any way. Another person who helped them was a gypsy, a Slovak of gypsy origin.
Okay.
I even remember his name because we were talking about him at home several times. His name was Kačica, if you
Kašice?
Kačica.
Kačica.
And he also, of course, my father paid him. And it's a good thing that my father had enough money to pay.
How did he have enough money?
He was a businessman. He was a merchant of timber. Timber. So he also helped of course, hid them, allowed them to find shelter in his house. And a humorous part, if you like, is that because my mother was very beautiful, and he kept asking, "Does she have a sister?" And my father kept promising him, after the war, her sister, we'll introduce you, and then you go arm in arm down the street, and you'll be a nice couple. He kept telling him that story over and over. I remember that my father telling me how they would go out.
Locking arms.
Arms in arm. So, and when the war was already coming to an end, when the end was approaching, like maybe January, February, I don't remember.
Of 1945.
and my parents were starting to become a little bit more optimistic.
Right.
He would say, "No, no, the war isn't over. What do you think?"
It's a gypsy. I remember this story. I didn't know it was a gypsy.
Yeah, no, the war isn't over. What do you think? What do you mean? The Germans aren't
Because
going.
they were paying him.
He was paying him, and it was an income, and like many people, this was their finest. This was their
Finest hour.
finest hour, where they could do something. It felt important.
Right. Okay. So did your mother have a sister?
She has a sister. She had a sister, but she was somewhere else, and her oldest brother and her youngest sister were elsewhere.
In Slovakia?
They were in another. I think they were in Hungary.
In hiding. Why didn't they all go together? You don't know.
I don't know. My grandmother was in another place too. She also fled. So everybody was in another place. And my grandfather, my mother's father, he was already taken to Bergen-Belsen, where he died in typhoid.
Do you know when?
Probably 43. So her eldest and her sister were in Hungary, and there they were part of a rescue operation.
By whom?
By one of the Jewish officials of the Jewish community in Hungary.
Partisans?
No, by the name of Kastner. He had a list of Jews whom he saved.
He's famous.
Yes, and of course, he was a very controversial person, and there's a lot of stories going around this incident.
Raised my hand with the gun.
He shot him once and twice, and he got him only on the third shot in the back when he was trying to get away. He's the one.
But he was accused of favoritism.
Right. In who he saved?
In the persons he saved by my uncles, and my uncle and my aunt they didn't know him, so he didn't do any favors. They were just part of a list that was made.
Yeah, that's
made
the
up.
one. Yeah.
So this was there. And
Somebody knew them in that
and
circle.
They somehow got on that train, which took them to safety.
Where?
Yeah, I think to Switzerland. I'm not sure. I'm not exactly certain.
So they survived the war?
Yeah, and they came to Israel before my parents. They made Aliyah.